Much love and infinite mojo to all of you listening to this, and even those of you who aren't. On homelessness and identity. One of the things I've always had an interest in is homelessness. I know that sounds awkward, but hear me out. I grew up on 90s comics, and two of my favorites were The Max and Spawn, both giving the topic dutiful and sincere coverage throughout their respective storylines. The Max looked into the comorbidity of homelessness and mental illness. Spawn covered more character based storylines about the outliers in society's alleys. Both comics showed a 10-year-old kid from a trailer park what real, honest, dramatic storytelling could produce in terms of the reader's response. I intend to talk about another specific issue of Spawn, issue number 29, in another video for completely different reasons. I'd always seen this in the backdrop of media as a serious problem with no simple answers. Having been through the experience, I have even less and even more questions now. Some of the people I saw stuck in the lowest of ruts had almost no discernible skills and an inability to interact with other people in a way that would preclude any chance of being given a chance. They were not just unhirable, they wouldn't be capable of even securing the interview. The one element that has been on my mind has been identity. Such a dangerous word nowadays, given it's been weighted by so much interest in forcing the world to conform to what you declare your identity is, that persona mask by which we navigate the world. And so much of the world navigates back into that identity, molding it over time by repetition breeding comfort. Someone's identity seems more to me like a hierarchy of narratives we tell ourselves about ourselves. If your children are very important to you, one of those first definitions might be father, husband. Then maybe what you do, carpenter, banker, ditch digger. Then possibly the interests or passions, gardener, gamer, writer. Upon that is piled another myriad of factors, including gender, sexuality, race, and nationalism, and a number of other things I don't care to talk about. The one thing about homelessness that is hard to escape is it is now the number one hierarchical factor involved in your own story about your own identity, and watching people struggle with that was conflicting, interesting, but sad. Chad would go on and on about when he was selling dope to the NA members down in Uniontown where we had run into one another before. He showed me the ropes early on where you could refill your water bottles, where the tent down by the river was, known as the tent, where you could get away with drinking, and what alleys you could take if you wanted to pound a Four Loco on the go. One thing Chad was absolutely charming to his own detriment, and that's what he used to fight that great identity hierarchy. Lonnie would always go on about how he was going to get a job and save up $3,000, get a nice apartment, and we could come by and show up whenever we wanted. Hell, you get a hoe and you want to take her up to the bedroom, you can do that. And there will always be cold beer in the fridge, and the weed man will always show up on time. That's how Lonnie escaped, spending his earnings at the bar, even though we knew 40s and tall boys were the frugal option. Lonnie had heart and a lot of it, but he was also a thief. He stole my cigarettes the first night in the shelter. You could come at 7 p.m., but you had to leave out by 7 a.m., and by 6:30 he'd swindled his way into my pack of American Spirits, which I only bought because I had a coupon for them. But he had been there long enough to see this as a mini classifier. He saw me as a white boy who smoked expensive cigarettes. He was also involved in stealing a bottle of vodka from Mike. Mike's wife died about 9 years ago. He found her dead after what I'm assuming was a drawn out illness, but he always played it down. A true Yinzer in spirit and dialect, Mike couldn't just get it together after that. He was using slash clinging to a current not girlfriend who he could swindle out hundreds of dollars worth a month. So Mike always had drinking money. So Mike was always drunk. At one point, he secured a $10 per hour position at McDonald's. I believe he lasted about a week before he said he was just taking some time off to heal up. You see, Mike had gotten so drunk he fell down a pile of rocks right on his tailbone, so much so that most of his thighs were bruised and fat with fluid. So he had a doctor's excuse, and they were going to hire him back as soon as he was better, but he could also sue him if they didn't for discrimination. I hope you see where I'm going with this. Mike couldn't even make it in the shelter. He would show up drunk and belligerent and inevitably got himself kicked out for good. No backsies. Mike stayed in a hole in a brick wall under an apartment building. One, nobody was renting, so as long as he cleaned up after himself, he got away with it for a while, and had to consider the threat of going to rehab for a warm place to sleep during the coming winter months. One of the last times I saw Mike was down at one of the drinking spots, the waterfall. It was just a trickle pool of water that went under a railroad bridge out into the rushing river passing by, just past the dam. The waterfall. Mike was drunk and he was on three of his four limbs and struggling to get that fourth one to work. Nope, again and again I watched him face plant to the ground until his face was bruised and scraped. I kept telling him to sleep it off. He wasn't going anywhere. He drank more of what little was left in his bottle. He started to cave, but every few minutes he'd get that second, third, fourth, fifth wave, and with everything he had, he would set himself up for face planting failure. By now, he couldn't even work out the physics of using a backpack as a pillow, but he was at least losing the fight enough to stop harming himself. I was kind of worried he might die of alcohol poisoning, but I wasn't going to risk not getting my two tall boys in before heading to the shelter for sleep, for the sake of having to deal with the police over my drunk friend. So, one of the inevitabilities I face is that my friend might die there, and he didn't. Obviously, had no memory of it after. He couldn't even see himself for the blackouts. Backpacks came in handy for keeping all sorts of things beyond just being an on the go pillow. Clothes, food, booze, water bottles, books for some of us, for me, whichever I'd borrowed from the library without their knowledge. I always brought them back whenever I would come back for the next Chuck Palahniuk novel I hadn't read yet. The Little White Lies that I never returned rant. I still can't bring myself to finish it. Toiletries, pens, paper, notebooks, sketchbooks, even a handful of old Disney Infinity Marvel figurines, which always earned me odd looks. I'd become that weird homeless artist guy. The kind that wouldn't say much unless prodded with pot or a little booze, at which point I'd rant and rave about whatever minuscule thing that pestered me that morning, that day, that evening. I went into pure survival mode. I would be confrontational enough with other shelter dwellers and staff just to keep people from wanting to see if I was all talk or not. I had size and I had brains, so I would just watch for guys' weaknesses. But the ones I cared about, like Mike, I'd grab a meal at Wendy's or a little booze or both. I got a job at a fruit market, warehouse, greenhouse, company, grunt work. I had spare cash, and one thing Mike was always generous. When he had money, you drank on his dime. So I was just returning the favor. But I saw him less and less, and then I got the apartment with a friend, and then I wasn't homeless anymore. And I wasn't on the top of my identity hierarchy. It wasn't even there anymore except a lingering shadow. You see, you can never go back to who you were before you were homeless, because you always know how far you can still fall. And most do from what the statistics look like. So much love and infinite mojo to all you out there who are listening to this, and even those of you who aren't. To all you fallen angels out there who are combing through their own shadow looking for meaningful answers. Maybe it's time to look for a little more light. As Bukowski put it, it may not be much light, but it beats the darkness. Please like, share, subscribe, all those things, and I hope to be making more of this content as time goes on, and hope you enjoy it. Peace.